Hello, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk About Children's Books. My name is Renee Edwards, and I am the Program Director for Fairfax County Public Library. You may be wondering, what are indie authors and why do we celebrate Indie Author Day, which is why you're here today? An indie author is someone who self-publishes in order to reach as many readers as possible and grow a profitable author publishing business. So our annual Indie Author Day is a very special event for libraries and its readers because it allows us to meet and celebrate the achievements of our local and indie authors. Today, we have a wonderful panel of writers to share their experiences as children writers. I would like to introduce Bev Harris, Janet Macreery, Kamakshi Murti, and Kelly Miller. Welcome and thank you all for being here. So let's start with our very first question. It's a simple one. Tell us about yourself. And we'll start with Bev.
Well, hello everyone again. And Renee, thank you again for having me to participate. I really appreciate this opportunity. And about myself, I'm like most of us, I have many facets and have done quite a few things in life. I'll just highlight today that I'm a native Virginian, but because I'm also a wife of a soldier, I've lived in many parts of the world and gotten to participate and learn about a lot of different cultures. I'm the mother of 2 daughters, and I am a retired federal government employee. I worked in the federal government for 30 years, and my last assignment was the FAA, Federal Aviation Administration, where I was an air traffic safety inspector, which was an extremely interesting and rewarding job because it gave me opportunity to participate in the safety of the national airspace, which takes care of us all.
All right, thank you. And Janet, please tell us a little about yourself.
Thank you also for having us all participate today. This is a great opportunity. My name is Janet. I was born and raised in New Jersey. My husband and I moved to the Virginia area in about 12 years ago. Then I've been a volunteer at the National Archives, our education department with George Mason's Gunston Hall and with the Lupus Foundation of America. For fun, we watch a lot of movies and love going to nationals baseball games.
All right, thank you very much. And Kamakshi, please tell us a little about yourself.
Hi, I'm a South Asian American woman. My many years in classrooms were in 3 continents, actually, Asia, Europe, and North America. And that has actually, all this experience has culminated in my writing both fiction and nonfiction. My own immigration to the US about 40 years ago, 13 years of volunteering with adults with disabilities, as well as research for my scholarly monographs, provided me with new perspectives, on bigotry and all its, overt and internalized aspects. For fun, what do? I mean, I am very fond of South Asian and South Indian classical music, and I learned the music, and I also learned the dance, which is called Bharatnatyam. So that I still keep up with performances by others who are trained in the arts. And also I love to write limericks. That is something that I also wrote for my children's book as well. I love writing in general. So I moved to Virginia actually from Middlebury College, from where I retired as chair of the German department.
Oh, wow.
And I've been here since 2008 and love it.
All right, thank you. And last but not least, Kelly, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here amongst some really wonderful, grateful people. It kind of fills my cup. I am a positive psychology practitioner, a coach and facilitator of resilience program. I'm the mother of 2 thriving teenagers. I am the wife of a retired Coast Guard officer. So I've also lived multiple places, but love Northern Virginia. And for fun, I'm an avid hiker. I love to collect national parks. And so the more the pandemic leaves us, the more my collection can grow. So can't wait to get back out there.
All right, well, welcome everyone. It's nice to hear a little bit about who you are. But now let's talk a little bit about your book. So tell us about your books and why did you, of all the different genres that are out there, why did you decide to write children's fiction? So Bev, we'll start with you.
So, first of all, I wanted to write children's books because I love children, and I believe that they are what our world will have to depend on one day. They're going to be the shapers of our world, and because of that, I think that it's so important that we pour into them how important they are, that we educate them, that we help to move them toward positive internal talk and resilience. And so when I think of writing a book, and also fun. I want them to find learning fun. So when I think of writing a book, I kind of think about all of those things in the messages that, I want to impart on them, that they're so valuable, that they can make good decisions, that, they're going to change the world for good one day. And that's kind of like what's always in my mind. And I've written books that for very early learners that, just teach them about the basics. And then for older kids, where they're going to school and they're facing these challenges of that, especially during the pandemic, that they've had to face. So that's kind of just like what it all is for me.
And Bev, can you talk about one book that you've written and tell us a little bit about that book?
Sure. Let's see. I'll talk about The Big Yellow Cat and the Blue Moon. This is
hold it up just a little higher.
Okay. Oh. This is a book for toddlers and early readers. It's a rhyme book about a cat, and a lot of people have it as a bedtime story because it is the story of a cat and his world of what happens when he has this really strange meow because the moon is blue. And my thought behind writing it is, number one, it would be a fun book for parents to read to their kids. It would be a fun way to kind of end the day. And also for people, children that are early readers, it's a rhyming book. So it kind of helps to build their vocabulary. And it has I'll just open the inside. It has very vivid colors in the illustrations. And, it's just a fun rhyme, family read aloud book. And I just always want to encourage parents or whoever the adults are in their kids' lives to just, read aloud and have fun and help them to see how fun reading is.
Thank you so much. All right, Janet, why did you decide to write children's fiction, and tell us about your books?
So I write middle grade historical fiction. The first two books are based mainly in Scotland and a little bit in Salem, Massachusetts in the 1690s. And for me, writing middle grade, that was the time in my own life when I couldn't get enough to read. And that was when reading was just pure joy and excitement and adventure, and no one telling me what to read, but getting to explore on my own and spending hours in a library, just finding the next adventure series. And so I wanted to write books that I would have read when I was that age.
Can you tell us about you said you wrote a 2-book as part of a series, right? Can you tell us about one of your books?
So Little Noble is the most recent, came out last year. And it takes place mainly in Glencoe, where there was a massacre in 1692. So it's historical fiction based 2 years after the massacre. And it's 13-year-old Mercy is dropped into this world accidentally on her way from London, trying to discover her family's secrets. and she meets a character from the first book that helps her get through Scotland because she's from London and figure out how things work and how things explore. And she has her own special talents, particularly with herbs and butterflies that help solve the mystery.
Am I the only one getting Outlander vibes from this?
Yeah, totally thought of it.
It actually has been called the Kids Outlander. So thank you.
Oh, nice.
I'm glad it wasn't just me, Kelly. And Janet, in your book, do you have anybody finding the perfect hot chocolate?
Oh, that would be my personal life's journey, is to find the perfect hot chocolate. Everywhere we go, we just got back from Iceland and we have to travel. When we travel, we have to try every cafe, every hot chocolate in every cafe to find what makes the perfect cup. And I am on an absolute mission.
So we'll be looking for that in your books. Like once you discover it, I'm sure one of your characters will stumble upon it accidentally and
I can't
love
wait.
it.
Yeah.
All right, Kamakshi.
Oh, well, the reason why I began, I mean, I have dealt with various genres during my scholarly career. Of course, there were boring scholarly monographs that typically land in some dusty basement. But once I retired, I had the time to write and dabble in other genre. I started writing murder mysteries, created 2 avatars of Agatha Christie's Miss Marple, but South Asian avatars, so 2 elderly women. But then children's books, when I was a child, I used to look for someone who looked like me in these books, Enid Blyton and so on. I never saw a South Asian face or a non-white face as I was growing up. And that was really something that I missed sorely, a child protagonist who really looked like me. And then a lifetime as a designated babysitter, where I had to tell stories, that also led me to thinking about writing a children's book. And I've been the storyteller for generations, so from nieces and nephews to great nieces and great nephews and on and on. And I found that so fun and so challenging that I decided to write my first book, Lillys Window. And yeah. And also, another thing that I missed, and I'm sure there are several books there, children with disabilities also. And that is something that I wanted to address as well, since I've been working since retirement at 2 centers for adults with disabilities. But then I wondered how a child would be affected, by any kind of disability. And that's something that I've incorporated in my writing as well.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk about your children's book?
This
Can you
is
tell us a little bit
Lalli's
About it?
Window. Can you see it? Yeah, the
Yes.
title here. And you see at the back that she has this prosthetic leg also. And she is a person who lost this leg in a car accident, and her world changes. I call it Lalli's Window because that's where she sits in her wheelchair looking out of the window and recognizing a world that she had never seen before. It was always from home to school and back, the school bus picking her up. But then suddenly she's banned to this home where the window is a window to her world, a new world. And she recognizes, and not recognizes, but she sees for the first time her neighbors, including a very old couple across the street. And she discovers all these things that are new to her. And at the same time, she has to cope with her body and the lack of a limb. And that's something that she does. A family, a very supportive family, immigrants to the US from South Asia. And so this is what actually the book is about, that she really depends on her family, on her friends to support her through this very hard time for her. The image of her body as well. So, yeah.
Thank you for that. It's so interesting writing about diverse characters because I too can remember growing up and not seeing picture books with little girls that looked like me. And I love that we're in this world now where diversity in its many wonderful facets is being shown. So yeah, it's such an important thing that I don't think we really thought about, but now we're more aware of its importance. So thank you for that. All right, Kelly, so why children's books? And tell us a little bit about your books.
Sure. Well, I typically write for practitioners in psychology. So most of my writing is a little bit more cognitive, I guess, a little higher kind of stuff, which I love doing as well. But when I was in training for my certificate in applied positive psychology, my daughter was in the throes of anxiety. And I went into it going, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to parent her. I don't know how to help her. I don't know what to do. And thankfully, we got a practitioner who didn't want to just throw medication at her. I'm not against medication, but I wanted it to be the last possible step that we would take. She started helping Dania develop a toolkit for her anxiety. After a while, Dania said, I don't want to go see this person anymore. All she talks about is my problems. So I went, got to switch, turn on the positive psychology, hat. And so I got together with my daughter and we created this story of Jane's Worry Elephant, which is a self-help guide for children with anxiety. So it's kind of a hybrid book. There's a fictional story of this little girl named Jane, who the elephant is, I have to give a nod to Jonathan Haidt. He is a prominent psychologist from the University of Virginia. He's now in New York, but he's an amazing psychologist who talks about the metaphor of the rider and the elephant. So this is where this idea came from. It basically says that anyone as small as a child can have control over something the size of the elephant. The elephant is basically your emotions. And so this book helps parents to be able to talk about anxiety with their kids in a way that's not scary, in a way that's not overwhelming to kids. And we created this because I never, ever wanted another mother to have to go through, and I get a little emotional about it, I'm sorry, but I never ever want another family to have to go through what we did, not knowing how to help their child. And so that's why this book was created, so that it can give you ideas, give you a toolkit, give you an understanding of what anxiety really is, and to be able to have conversations with kids about what it means, what anxiety means, and what it means to be emotionally resilient. So that's what that is.
Wow. That's such another great point, because that's another thing that I was a teacher. I taught third grade, and you never really addressed children's anxiety issues. It was like we expected them to be little robots devoid of personality, and if they got out of line, we gave them Ritalin. I mean, it was a very different time. I was a teacher in the 90s, and just like the diversity, I'm just so glad that we are finally acknowledging children as being little people with personalities who are impacted by trauma the same way we are as adults. So yeah, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So some of you touched on this, but where do you get your ideas for for the book that you've written, for future books that that you want to write? Where do you find ideas for writing? So we'll start with Bev.
Well, when I'm looking for ideas, first of all, before I answer this question, I would just like to say kudos to all of the authors today, because you have introduced some absolutely fabulous books that will be just, wonderful for children. So I, just kudos to you all. And now back to me. Okay, now. When I'm looking for ideas for books, I just look at the world around me. I look at kids that I know, and their parents and their family, and some of the things that they talk about. I look at Instagram. I follow lots of mommy bloggers and people like that are in touch with children, because my children now are adults. And I don't work with, because of the pandemic, Sunday school or anything like that. And, I was an adult educator. So now I have to glean in the world around me and just, observe and just, and then I just leave it to my own imagination. I think about, like you said, as a child, if I, when I was reading, I didn't find, myself represented in books. So, I have, children of color as protagonists in some of my books, and just the world around me, just paying attention and being intentional about what's going on around me.
And Bev, let me give you some prompts, because your bio said that you write books about building self-confidence in children. And that's another thing I think is really important, because I wasn't that confident as a child. We tell children today, use your words. But what does that even really mean? How do we give them the confidence so they can communicate effectively to people around them? So kudos to you, Miss Bev.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I would just kind of, if I could add, as far as being a confident child, I was not, because I had a sister that was brilliant and still is brilliant, and is a famous professor and all of that. So I was kind of the one that got, very little attention. And as a result, I didn't have much confidence. So I just think that it's oh so important, for everybody in a child's world to just be aware that, this little person that's standing in front of you might not be the brightest one, the shiniest one, but it's still an amazing person,
Here, here. Thank you very much for that. I was the dim bulb, but I was special too in my own unique way.
Exactly. And now look at you. Look at you.
Yeah, look at me. All right, thank you, Bev. All right, Janet, please tell us about where do you get your ideas?
The first book, which is called The Little Wicked, actually came from when we were traveling through Scotland, and we went to the Glencoe Visitor Center, and I learned about the Glencoe Massacre. And this little voice followed me home and jabbered in my head for a couple of years before I started to just start writing it down, and what would have been like to be at the massacre and to survive the massacre, and what would have happened next. And so it started from there. But building on what Bev said, it's a lot of paying attention to what's happening now and to what people and kids around you are doing and saying and thinking and expressing and not expressing, and how to incorporate that into a historical fiction story that is relatable to kids today, as well as tells a story of what might have happened in the 1690s. So we are lucky enough, well, we were before the pandemic, to travel a bit in the United States and in parts of Europe, and really paying attention to that, and also paying attention to the kids I got to, in my volunteer work, to, really what are they saying, what are they thinking, and how do they act with each other, and what are they saying when they think adults aren't listening, and how to incorporate some of that into a relatable story. For the most part,
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say that for the most part, my stories are character driven. So once the character starts to grow, she kind of takes over the storyline.
And I think it's amazing that there was this terrible event in history that for some reason spoke to you, and you really wanted to kind of tell that story through the eyes of a child. And so I think that's powerful, that something about that event moved you to want to write about it. The voice didn't leave your head.
Yeah, she followed me home, and it was, she stayed there for a couple of years before I started writing.
Sometimes the idea just sits with you until the time is right, for sure. All right, Kamakshi, can you tell us a little bit about where do you get your ideas? You touched on it a little bit, but
yeah, listening to Beverly and to the others also, I also look around, the world around me. But then what happened when I was telling stories to children, in the family, I would tell them stories from Enid Blyton or from, other storybooks with white protagonists. And I suddenly thought to myself, why don't they look like you, my nieces and nephews, my great nieces and my great nephews? And I think that was one of the ideas I got, to introduce a South Asian protagonist into my book. The secondly, also my years and years of teaching. I've had a half a century of teaching experience at all levels, mainly at the college level, but that teaching experience has also exposed me to a lot of ideas, a lot of problems that children might have, that young adults have. And I thought it would be really good to listen to them. And in listening to them carefully, I try to introduce that in my book as well. I'm still listening. As I'm writing, I'm still listening. And I think that's very important for me, because I grow along with these voices in my books as well. Never stop growing. I'll be 80 next year, but then I won't stop growing.
Love that.
And really that is, I think, and another quick thing, if I might add, I've been a member of a jury called NEEV, N-E-E-V, NEEV Book Award for children's books in India. because for the first time, there was this feeling that children in India needed to access more books. They would typically be confronted by books from the West, of course, that's most popular. But then we wanted to introduce them to books with an Indian connection. And being a member of the jury, that introduced me to so many fabulous books written in India or outside India, but with this very, very palpable Indian connection. And that is, I think, giving me more and more ideas about my own writing.
Oh, wow. And I think you said something that just struck me, listening. You have to listen to people and hear their stories, and that can be very inspirational. Absolutely. Kelly, please tell us, where do you get your ideas? You talked a little bit about that. But
yeah, I'm a bit of a science geek, so I'm constantly researching positive psychology. I'm in it, I swim in it till my fingers are all pruny, and knowing this is the wild west of psychology. So positive psychology didn't even really begin until 1998. The study of what is right with us rather than what is wrong with us has taken a huge surge in the last couple of decades. And so for me, it's understanding that there is an intuition about positive psychology, doing what feels good and doing what is righteous in a way, but there's so much nuance to it. And there's so much cultural influence that we have to really understand what's going on within the family, what's going on within the schools, what's going on within the friend groups, what's going on within our extended family, within our community. And so for me, it's finding the research and then finding a way to make it relatable to other people, especially kids, because it's positive psychology transformed my family, 100% transformed my family. And so I want to be able to offer that to other people as well to help them transform their families.
why do we look at the negative? Why is that
It's called a negativity bias. We actually have an ingrown part of our brain that looks for threat. And so in order to overcome the negativity bias, because our amygdala, that's the old wiring part of our brain, it looks for threat within our environment. So we're always looking for the negative to keep ourselves safe. But knowing what we know now is that we are incredibly malleable. So understanding if it's a real threat or if it's not takes a little bit of work within our thought process. And children don't actually have the ability to do this, what's called metacognition, between the ages of 8 and 10. So we expect them to think about their thinking, but they're actually not cognitively able to do that until they're a little bit older. So understanding ways to be able to help encourage the process to begin, to help them sort of crack open, if you will, to the understanding that what they think actually determines their behavior. It's a really massive part of what's going on in positive psychology. It's exciting.
Wow, that's fascinating. Thank you, Kelly.
Sure.
Wow. All right, thank you all. Let's go to another question. So what was one of the most surprising things you learned in creating your books? So Bev, we'll start with you.
I think one of the most surprising things that I learned is beyond the writing process, which is to me, the best part, the fun part, because I've always liked to write, I've always liked to read, and I've always been, fairly creative, a crafty type of photography type of, person. I'm always, all of my interests lie around creativity. But the difficulty was when I moved from the creative aspect to actually publishing, the self-publishing aspect of it, and then the business that's associated, with marketing and that piece. So that was kind of area, those areas were very new to me, and and kind of daunting in a lot of ways. I found some very surprising things out. For instance, if you're publishing a book, and if you have one page that's a color page, then you have to pay for the whole book as if it were printed all in color. Those kinds of things that you learn along the way.
Yeah, the writing is the easy part. It seems like everything else that comes after, that's where the complexities lie. Oh, wow. Thank you, Beverly. All right, Janet. So what was one of the most surprising things you learned in creating your books?
again, it is not during the writing process, but afterwards of not only did other people want to read what I wrote, which was a nice surprise, but the variety of people who wanted to read a middle grade historical fiction adventure story with a female protagonist. A lot of people my age and older, maybe that was missing in their own childhood, that, children adventure stories were mainly male protagonists at the time. And so with the female protagonist, a lot of women my age and older are reading these books, not just mine, but a lot of middle grade fiction, historical fiction and contemporary fiction, because they didn't have it when they were their age. And that was very surprising and very exciting to me that this is, reaching more than just children. And then children and grandparents are reading them together, and parents and children are reading them together, or reading and then comparing, or reading them as a family read. And that wasn't an intention in the beginning, but it's really exciting to me and really fun to watch and to hear about.
All right, thank you. And Kamakshi.
Thank you. Just like Janet, actually, I was also surprised at many things, especially at the type of readers that came to my book. But one thing, I was invited to talk to 4 middle graders, from a school in New England. It was a Zoom meeting, and they were talking about my book, and I was really thrilled and amazed to encounter a really unusual level of maturity and compassion also that they brought to the book. That is something I wouldn't have expected of 11-year-olds, but somehow the questions that they asked, and that is something that I really, really enjoyed. And the writing process itself was done and finished. I'd published the book. And this kind of feedback that I got from them, that is what thrilled and amazed me. I mean, I was really astonished. And that seemed to me to be an impetus to write more, and since then I've written actually 5 more in the series, haven't published them yet. But that was, I think, something that really egged me on and thrilled me, no end. And another thing was, I start my book with a limerick, and I have limericks prefacing, each chapter. And one of the boys who came to a book exhibition here in Gaithersburg, I asked him, I said, do you know what a limerick is? And he said, of course I do. And then he showed me a limerick that he had written. He had brought it along to the exhibit to show me, to challenge any questions that I might have. But I was thrilled. I mean, this boy knew exactly what a limerick was. Well, that's my takeaway. But I was really thrilled at the maturity, and also other readers who came. My family, of course, read it, but then there were older members, just like Janet said. There were older members in my family of my age who also enjoyed reading it. So it might have to do with the South Asian protagonist. I don't know what it has to do, maybe with the disability factor there. But I was thrilled. Yeah.
I guess that would be the motivating force into creating more books, when you see the joy or you see the emotions that your book invokes in other people who are reading your stories. Yeah, that's powerful. Kelly, what was one of the most surprising things you learned in creating your books?
How important the illustrations are. So vital. And I really feel like the mission behind our book, which was to get this out to as many families as possible, to reduce symptoms of anxiety and to really help educate as many people as possible. But because we were mission focused, because we wanted so badly to help other people, this illustrator donated his artwork for us. And it was this multinational collaboration between him, and he did it because he had family members who suffered from anxiety. So I don't know, there's something very special about the process, bringing people in as a mission focus. And when those illustrations came in and the story really came to life, it was really surprising. It brought us to tears, because my daughter had originally drawn the characters, and he just took them and made them bigger and bolder and even more beautiful. So that was the most surprising thing for me, was the really vital part of any children's book, which is the illustrations.
Yeah, that's a good question for the other panelists. I know, Janet, I'm assuming your book is a chapter book, so maybe not a lot of illustrations. But Bev and Miss Murti, how did you find your illustrators?
I was the illustrator for my book.
Oh.
So most of it is what I did, and they accepted it. You know, the publishing process was easy enough because I am an artist also. I mean, so it was made easy for me. Yeah.
Oh, wow. And
Well,
Bev, what about you?
I found my illustrators just by searching, word of mouth, asking friends, looking at people's work, things of that nature. Because I am not an artist, but I look for somebody that kind of that I feel understands, what I'm trying to convey. And so far, it's worked out very well.
All right, thank you. There are many facets to writing a book that I don't think people always think about. And I think when you have to self-publish, it just makes that
Mhm.
the job, the task even more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is a great segue to our next question. And again, I think some of you touched on it, but what are the biggest challenges to being an indie writer? So we'll start with you, Bev.
I'm sorry. I think that my biggest challenges to being an indie writer has been just to get to move toward a little bit toward the mainstream, in terms of as I mentioned before, just marketing and being able to find stores that will sell my books and things of that nature. Just kind of like being able to get the word out there without having like a traditional publishing house behind me. So, but it's been a great learning experience though. And so now what I do is, not that I know it all or anything, but I help other new indie authors. I help them to publish, I share information and that kind of thing. And so it's kind of helped me build a community. So I appreciate it. I think that anything that you learn, even if you have to struggle a bit to get the information, I think that it's valuable to you, and very useful to others.
And if you could alleviate the struggle of another local writer by sharing your experiences, that just
Exactly.
paying it forward, that's wonderful.
Yeah, makes it worthwhile.
For sure.
Mhm.
Janet, so what are some of the challenges of being an indie author?
So ditto to everything Bev just said. I mean, it's exactly spot on. Exposure. It's getting other people to know that these books exist and that they're worth reading, and they're building a community. Really, as Bev said, is the best way to help other people be noticed, and then they help you be noticed. And that's really grassroots sort of movement. And I think the one thing that most readers don't understand is the value of their review, whether it's on a library site, on a book site, on something that is just book review sites. Those reviews are helpful to the author in many ways, but they're also helpful to other readers. But I said that there are adults who like to read my books, and then they ask me, what else can I read? What else is like your book that's out there? And I tell them, go onto a book review site, ask your librarian first, but then go onto a book review site, review a book, and then the site will give you examples of other books that are like your book, that are like the book that you just reviewed. And it helps the author in that the review is out there, hopefully positive, and other people will find it. But the review also helps the reviewer in that they will then get suggestions, or they'll root around the sites themselves. So exposure is the biggest challenge, I think, for any indie author, and building a community, and also encouraging people to review your books and encourage people to review other people's books, which might then lead them to yours.
Right, thank you. And Miss Murti, what are some challenges of being an indie writer?
Everything that Bev and Janet have just said. I mean, ditto, ditto, ditto. And for me, actually, the sophistication of the tools that we have now, the advanced technology, that forces me to resort to website developers at times, like WordPress or others. And some of them are not shy about exploiting, my lack of knowledge, my naivete. And so that is something that I really struggle with as well. But in the main, what Janet especially said, review, 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 that is so helpful to get any book of ours noticed and help others to recognize books of this kind as well. I think reviewing is so important. Yeah.
Thank you. Well, I am guilty now. So when I read books, I will make sure to go online to write a review.
Review them.
I only write when I don't like the book. This book is terrible.
Negativity bias.
All right, Kelly, what are some challenges? to
Yeah,
being
it's hard to come up with an answer when they've already answered how I was going to answer. But I would say one of the biggest challenges, besides marketing and getting reviews and exposure and all of that super fun stuff, is being patient. Is being patient to find like your next bolt of lightning, your next, inspiration, that next wonderful idea. That I would say that would be a challenge, is just being patient for that to happen. Because like Janet said, it took her several years listening to that inner voice, following her around to be able to let her be heard. And so a lot of us, we push those things down sometimes. And so just being patient and brave enough to listen, I guess, to those next inspiration.
Yeah.
I think listening to you all talk about the feedback and the marketing, at the end of the day, you're doing this because it's a joy, or you felt compelled to do this to help others. But I guess it just reminds me that at the end of the day, this is kind of like a business too. And the feedback helps, and the buying of books, it all helps you, because even though for some of you, it's not necessarily your livelihood, there should be some compensation for your time and effort and the joy that you're spreading to others. So that's a very good reminder that you're not doing this for free. Although you kind of are, but you're not. I feel conflicted in saying that. Thank you very much. All right. So writing, does it energize or exhaust, or a combination of both? So Bev, we'll start with you.
It is a combination of both. And it just kind of depends on what's going on that day. If I am interacting with kids, or if somebody has left me a review, one, and it kind of is so it's so funny sometimes what will happen. The day that I say that I'm giving up, I'm never writing another book, somebody will send me a review and say, my grandchild really enjoyed this book, or thank you so much. Or somebody, like one day when I was having I was at a very low point, a neighbor knocked on the door and brought me a little note from his granddaughter that said, "Dear Miss Bev," and so it's a day-to-day thing, but most days in my mind is very exciting to me, and I enjoy it. And it's, when I tire, I'll stop a while, and then a new idea hits me, and I just restart.
We forget the power of positive feedback or encouragement, and how that can inspire and motivate. It's so important. Thank you for that. Janet, exhaust or energize?
Yes.
Or all of the above?
Sometimes at the same time. Yeah, it's a lot of what Beverly said, as far as there are days when you're just, why am I even bothering anymore? And no one's going to care. It doesn't matter. And then it's amazing. It really is amazing when you're at your lowest point and you're ready to give up. Some small little spark happens somewhere, and it's uncanny how often it happens. But yes, it depends on how the work is going, what else is going on in my life. Should I be spending the time on this, or should I be doing something else? But then there are those days where it just flows, or you get a positive piece of feedback from somewhere, especially if you weren't expecting it, or from a source you weren't expecting. But I think that's the highs and lows of any job or hobby or anything. It ebbs and flows. But it truly is amazing, as Beth pointed out, that how often when you're low, something small sparks you and then you're off and running again.
So I will confess that I came to this event a little kind of tired. I had a busy morning, and talking to you wonderful ladies, I am energized. So you're right. I think it's the ebb and flow of your job, no matter the job, because it has been such a delight being a part of this discussion with you all. So thank you for energizing me. All right. So Miss Murti, we'll go to you. Does
I dare
writing
you to
exhaust-
say my first name again.
I have given up.
No.
I'm not going to mess it up
You
any
are
longer.
you are not a person who will give up. I know that. So I challenge you.
But this
Well,
is being
Kamakshi
recorded.
will
So I'm
tell
like,
you.
I pronounced your
Kamakshi.
name 5 different ways since you started.
No, energize or exhaust. For 40 years of my teaching, I was exhausted because it was publish or perish, within academia. And then I retired in 2008. In 2012, my last scholarly monograph, To Veil or Not to Veil, came out. And that was pure joy in writing. And I suddenly realized I needed the time away from teaching and grading papers and, the busyness of teaching in general, as all of you are aware. And it became just pure joy. I mean, I really, every time I take pen to paper or fingers to the keyboard, I am energized. I mean, it has not really stopped. I mean, exhaustion only, physically I might be tired, but mentally I'm always alert and energized. And it's such a blessing to have that.
I think people underestimate how exhausting teaching can be and how
Yes.
draining it can be. And then having to publish, I can't imagine being
Oh,
a
yeah.
university professor and having that added pressure as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
And being relieved of all of that. Now you can really focus on the joy of just
Yeah.
creating.
Yes.
Oh, you people just don't understand. Yes. It's hard, especially now. I feel for teachers now.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it. I had a friend that's a teacher, and I said, should I go back into the classroom? She said, no. I'm listening. All right, lovely ladies. Another question. What advice do you have for writers? Either they're thinking about writing, such as myself, or they have a first book, they're trying to get started. What advice can you provide? So we will go. I'm sorry, Kelly, I didn't ask my energize or exhaust question. I'm so sorry.
That's
So we
okay.
will back up.
No worries.
And-
It's definitely an energizer. There is a concept in positive psychology called flow. And the psychologist, his name was Csikszentmihalyi. That's how I always remember his name. He actually recently passed away, which is a great loss for the field. But the concept of flow is that you have this activity that takes you out of your normal conscious space, and the emotions are neutral. The task itself is difficult, but you sort of lose space and time in that place when you're writing. That's the concept of flow. And it's actually a repleting kind of exercise. So it gives you energy. And I 100% feel that writing for me is a flow activity, something that fills my cup, something that gives me more energy to get through my day.
Wow.
So do you start your writing sessions like with a meditation or something to get you in the...
I have a relaxation like playlist that I use. And so it's just classical music that's in the relaxation realm, nothing too revy, nothing too, too somber, but it's sort of this like peaceful space. And so with my research and my writing, I just create that kind of atmosphere and then just dive in and go.
Oh, wow, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. So Bev, what advice would you offer a writer?
Well, I think I would begin with telling them or advising them to examine what their real goal is, in writing. I mean, are you writing because you truly have a message that you want to share with the world, or is your goal more to write, are you publishing a book to for credibility in your profession, or are you thinking you're publishing something that you want to be commercial, that you probably will have a lot of sales with? So, once they kind of really decide what their true goal is, then from that, I would say, align your topic with what your goal is. And once you do that and do your research, then, you've kind of set your expectations. And then, the rest is, fun, putting pen to paper and, going through the process.
I want to be Stephen King. That's my. I don't think that's going to happen, so I might have to lower my expectations.
Why
I
not?
think anybody is like him, like he's so unique.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you, Beth. All right, Janet, what advice would you offer writers?
Do it. Just do it. Just start writing. Just keep doing it. And speaking of Stephen King, in his book on writing, he talks about how the first draft he does with the door closed. And that's just for him. It's getting it out, getting it down, getting a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end with story arcs and all of that. Get it down. And then he metaphorically opens the door and rewrites the drafts many, many times, does much more research, fills in the holes, makes different characters, kills off different characters, which he does a lot. But it's that kind of concept, you can't edit a blank sheet of paper. So get something down and then you can change it and make it better and make it grow, but just start.
What about like having an accountability partner? Like, so you.
A critique group is really great, because then every month you have to bring new pages and they will know if you didn't write that month. They will know. And you learn so much from a critique group as far as how to approach your own work, how to approach somebody else's work. And really, one of the most important things that my critique group did was have somebody else read it out loud. Because when you read your own work, it's certainly to yourself and even sometimes out loud, you change it, you make the corrections verbally, and that doesn't get changed on the page. So if somebody else is reading it to you, you're like, wow, that is not what I meant to say. And you're not going to be sitting there next to the fourth grader saying, oh, wait, no, I really meant this. It has to come across on the page. So yes, accountability, critique groups, if you're lucky enough to have such a thing, they have them online all the time, or just a writing partner, before work or after work, did you get your hours in? Did you get your pages in? Absolutely. NaNoWriMo is another great accountability which is happening right now, which is very intense, but also very helpful.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. And Miss Murti, what advice would you offer to writers?
You have, you have an idea and you have a message, to send out to the world, let us say. And I would say that, with this idea, you have to write about what you know, you have to, that is important, I think. You want to send out this message and you want to make it as powerful as possible, but never, never, never give up. Start writing, as the others have said, begin writing. And I think, when I was writing fiction, I was so used to writing scholarly monographs that I said, how can I even deal with fiction? How do you fictionalize something? I'm so used to doing research and facts and, and everything has to be corroborated. But then if you have this message that you want to, like with my Lillys Window, that is something that I'm so passionate about. And if you're passionate about something, it will come out in your writing. And I think you should never, never give up. And as someone, I think was it Janet or Beth, share your writing with others and get their input. That is also very important. But never, never give up. If you want to write, you can do it.
Thank you. And Kelly, what advice would you offer writers?
Find balance. Find balance between your craft and what you're doing out in the real world. because we can all dive in and we can all be so committed and love what we're doing. But if we're not connected outside, we might sort of shift and sort of lose ourselves a little bit. So I would say find balance in the process. If you need a break, get up. If you need, you know what I mean? Like find fun in all of it. And also I would add, screen your phone calls, because as an indie author, there are a lot of people who try to get you to put your book into a movie, or, you know, join their vanity publishing house, or do, like, there's a million of them. So just screen your phone calls pretty well after you publish.
So you don't want your book made into a movie?
Listen, there's so many that are scams. You have to be really,
Oh.
really mindful of who's actually calling you. So you just have to be careful about who's reaching out to you, where they got your number, what's the information, where are they coming from? Because they have these like kind of tentacles where they're telemarketing every indie author ever to try to get them to use their work for whatever, you know what I mean? So you just have to be mindful of that as people are trying to get to you.
Oh, wow. I've never heard that before. That's very interesting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's something I had to learn the hard way. So,
Wow.
Oh,
for another indie author to not have to go through like the million phone calls where you're like, no, I don't want to talk to this person. You know?
Oh my goodness, I had no idea. Yeah.
Janet, I saw you nodding in agreement. Did you have an experience similar to that?
Well, yeah, I at least once a week there's a message on my voicemail that's like, oh, your book has been, curated. We wanted to make a children's animated series out of it. And then you look up the name of the company that they give you online, if they even give you a company, and it's like, oh, I gave these people $7,000 and they did nothing. And it's just a way for them to get money out of you because they know you're an indie author and you don't have the machine of a traditional publishing company behind you. Hollywood doesn't call you.
Right. You have to pitch things. Exactly right. Yes, that's exactly
what
right.
it is. No one is going to call you and offer you your dream. You have to go out and get it.
Yep.
So
Oh, that's disappointing.
indie author life.
Yeah. Well, you have to, Kelly, what were you gonna add to that, Kelly?
Yeah, I said it's the reality of indie author life. Like, that's real. It's true.
Well, how do you cross over? How do you go from being an indie author to one that's backed by a publishing company? How does that happen?
An agent.
And do you
That's
have to
how.
have a certain number of books? Do you have to have a certain number of
It kind
fans?
of depends on your message and your backing, I would say, but an agent, a legitimate agent, again, another area where you have to be really careful about who you're contacting, because there's a million out there like, we're the greatest agents ever, and they're really not legitimate. So it takes a lot of work to get an agent. You have to send like a lot of queries out, and they only take a certain number of people. They only take a certain number of the genre. So that's just more homework if you really want to go that route.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Thank you
if
so
I may,
much.
if I may
Yes.
just interject, I mean, for actually my Lillys Window is the first time I self-published, but otherwise all the other books that I've written have been through an agent and through a traditional publisher. And in fact, for my Murders Most Matronly, the first of the series of these two Miss Marple avatars, the agent did a lot of good work in India, and she was the one who helped me actually bring it out and contact other publishers. So it's very good to have an agent, but you have to send query after query after query, and I stopped counting the rejections that I got.
Yep.
So, you just put that aside. In fact, I had a folder saying rejections, and then I deleted it because it was too depressing. But as you said, the agent, if you want to go traditionally. In fact, I've just had two books published. One came out in November. It's a collection of short stories. And the other one is the second in the series, The Murder Mysteries, that came out in October this year. So both are traditional publishers. So once you are known in the publishing realm, I think, and my publishing career in scholarly writing has also given me a certain, status there. So yeah, but it is very tough. Yeah.
All right.
Sorry.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Very excited about this. These are my sketches, by the way. So again, I sent them to, and then they sort of, manipulated and changed the scene, but then the original sketches they managed to keep. So,
Wow,
but
what a
it
compliment.
was a good 2021 and a good year to have it because of COVID and so on. So this at least was heartening in many ways. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Thank you for that. We'll ask maybe one or two more questions of our panelists. Our attendees here, if you have any questions, I'm going to invite you in about maybe 8 minutes to unmute and just simply ask our writers your questions, or if you feel more comfortable, placing them into chat, and I will read them out for our writers to respond to. All right, my dear panelists. This was a question that a colleague came up with, and I didn't quite understand it, but I thought it was really interesting. Are you a pantser by the seat of your pants or a plotter when you're writing your stories? What are you? So Bev, we'll start with you.
Well, I think I began writing as a pantser, and I have moved to become more of a plotter. When I wrote my first book, I primarily wrote it when I was traveling back and forth, commuting back and forth from work on the train. And it was just kind of like a fun afternoon, thing to do. And then I decided after I shared it with a couple of friends and and with their children, and they enjoyed it, I decided to publish it. But since that time, I have moved more into becoming a plotter, where I actually do, research, and I, do an outline and, all of those things, so it's been a continuum for me.
Was it easier being a pantser, or it's easier plotting?
I think plotting is actually easier, because when you plot as a plotter, you kind of like, I begin kind of like the end in mind. I kind of know where I want to go. And, and as a pantser, as I said, it was just mostly, a fun activity. I had such a technical job that I, was kind of a therapy for creativity in the evenings.
All right, thank you. And Janet, are you a pantser or a plotter?
Okay, if we're using pantser and plotter, then I am definitely a plantser.
There's always one in the group.
But to use different terminology, what I really consider myself to be is a knitter. It's that I get pieces of ideas, I get conversations, I have scenes, things like that are from all over the story. And I write them down in different places, and then I put them all on one document, and then I fill in the pieces in between. So it really is planting. I get these ideas that are just totally by the seat of my pants kind of thing. Oh wow, that would be great. Or you hear a phrase and you think, oh, if I change it a little bit, that'll make more sense in the book. And you put all those things down, and then you fill in then you plot your way through to make them make sense. So it's really, I think of it more as knitting, a little piece here and a little piece here, and then you knit them together. But if we're using pantser and plotter, it's definitely plantser.
And then Janet, for you, the interesting kind of factor would be that you're taking events from history and fictionalizing those events. So that's another kind of complicated layer on just making up a story with fictional characters. You're fictionalizing a real event in history, which I would imagine would be difficult, kind of, sort of, maybe.
Well, that part is what is the most exciting for me, because there are holes in history. There's the accepted of what happens, but depending on which side you're talking to, it's something different happened or for a different reason. So you find those holes in history, and you get to change history or write your own. Or, my main characters are all fictionalized. They're all fictional characters from the start. They didn't exist ever. And then you put them in scenes with actual historical figures or in historical situations, and they get to change history. They get to change what happened. one of the most exciting things when I was writing the first book, Little Wicked, was I was so involved in the massacre at Glencoe, and I wanted it to be connected to America, that I just went onto history.com and I put in the year, and guess what came up? The Salem witch trials.
Oh, my goodness.
And boom, right there's your huge connection. So it starts in the massacre of Glencoe and it ends during the Salem witch trial. So I had to find a way for her to cross the ocean. And
Wow.
and so that was a lot of, historically, how would that have happened? Could she even have done that as a 12-year-old girl by herself? And all of those kinds of things. That to me is the exciting kid in a candy store kind of stuff. Can this happen? How can I make this happen? What can I change so that can happen? So that the history part is what's really exciting.
But do you have people say, that's not right? You can't just rewrite history. That's wrong.
Well, that's the beauty of, you find the holes in history. It's like, okay, what you're saying is from this side, this is what was thought, but have you seen this part of the story? Or that's just a theory. These are some other theories by these scholars who say this, that, and the other thing. The cause of the Salem witch trials has 1,000 theories. So I was totally free to make up my own, because no one could say, this is exactly what happened. No, you don't know that's exactly what happened. You don't know that. You can't say that. I know more about the Salem witch trials than you do, because I read all of them. I read all the literature. So I know there is no one absolutely definite cause. So I can make up anything I wanted, and no one can challenge me and stand firm.
Thank you. Very good answer. Because you will have those people that will say, that's not right.
Yeah, you have to have your research to back yourself up. But even in historical fiction, it is fiction, but you have to have your historical research to say, okay, this is why I was able to do this.
Mhm. All right, thank you. Miss Murti, are
Yes,
you a
I-
pants?
No, sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry. I was so excited by Janet's response.
No, I will
dive in.
concede to you. The floor is yours.
No, I wanted to use, Janet said she was like a knitter, isn't it? I mean, but then I would see myself as a plantser, perhaps, combining both the words. But mine is dialogue driven, basically. So, I mean, for children's stories, I remember going back some 75 years or 70 years just to find out how I talked, and the dialogue is what drives my stories, actually. And I talk to myself and talk to all those characters, and in talking to them, that's how the story develops for me. So I'm not sure how I can even react to your question. It is character driven, of course, but then I do both at the same time, the pantsing and the plotting. Very difficult to define how I do it. But then the main thing is that these dialogues are charging through my brain. They're going back and forth, and as they come out, I capture them and write them out and read them out to myself and then to others, and try to make sense of whether that kind of a dialogue is even possible. But yeah, it's very dialogue driven, maybe.
So you start with your dialogue and then fit the
Yes.
story around the
Yes.
dialogue, the
Yes.
conversations.
Yeah,
Mhm.
because the conversation is what really sort of drives my storytelling as well. And that's what I used to do as a babysitter as well. I would have to imitate various voices, the villain and the hero and the heroine and so on. And I think that's what comes out also in my writing for children. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Kelly, what are you?
I'm definitely a plotter, but I think that's just how I do a lot of writing for different publications in psychology. And so I have to have kind of a plan to be able to fit the concept into a certain number of words. So I kind of have to keep it to this number. So I have to plot. If I don't plot, I'm so admiring the inspirational process of the others, though. That's amazing to me. Like, that's such a gosh, I don't even know, it's like something working through you, it sounds like, which I love the concept of that. But I'm definitely more of a, again, I've called myself a geek. It's the science, this is what we need to talk about, here are the little things about it, here's the history of it, it's the geeky science part of me. platter.
You don't go through and count your words. I have 500.
I used to have to. I did. I used to have to, getting paid for different publications. So I had to, I'd have to invoice them. Like, how many words was it? So I have to, because then, I had to get paid. So I had to count my numbers.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think we're the same. I'm very type A. I like,
Yeah, just like get it.
yes. I like my boxes.
Yeah.
Very comforting to me.
Just
All right.
to add quickly, just to what Renee actually, Kelly said. As long as I was doing scholarly writing, I had to do exactly what Kelly does, right? And so for me, it was freeing myself from those constraints when I started writing children's literature.
Right.
So I think that was a genre that enabled me to do this kind of free thinking, if you will.
Makes total sense.
Yeah.
Total sense to me.
Thank you, Renee, for allowing me.
Some people need the boxes, some people blow them up. That's just kind of how it is.
Yeah.
Nothing's right or wrong, just different approaches for sure.
It's a process, right? It's a difference in process. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so we're going to ask our last question, one of the most important questions.
Oh.
How can people buy your books? So Bev, we'll start with you.
Well, my books are available on my website. The URL is www.bharrisbooks.com/books. They're also available on Amazon, and in Barnes and Noble and Target and Walmart online.
Great, thank you. And Janet, how can people buy your books?
Everywhere fine books are sold. They're available through the online. And if you want to find a local bookstore, it's bookshop.org or indiebound.org are great places to go, and they'll help you find independent bookstore that can order the book for you. I also want to remind people that libraries are great places to find books. I have many times gotten a book out of a library and then purchased it as a gift for somebody else or for myself. So as an author, I have absolutely great respect for libraries and the services to authors that they provide. If your favorite book is not at a library, Renee, correct me if I'm wrong, but you can always submit a request for the library to perhaps acquire it for their collection. Yeah, remember independent bookstores as well as the big ones.
Yeah, there is a process that our book collectors will go through. They'll review the book to see if they want to add it to the collection and then contact the writer if that happens. You're absolutely correct. Yes. All right, Miss Murti, how can people buy your books?
That's how I got my book, Lillys Window, into your library system, actually. So that's exactly what I did. But yes, just like Janet and Bev mentioned, various sources, Amazon, you just type in my name and all my books will be shown. Goodreads, Walmart, thrift books, Amazon, of course. And what else? I mean, you just have to actually, what the best thing to do is to just type in my name, the full name, and everything will pop up. So I think that might be one way to do it. Yeah.
All right, thank you. And Kelly.
Yeah, I would say Google my name, but you'll get some like mathematician or like that won't work. There's a famous mathematician named Kelly Miller. He is not me.
Oh, he is not you.
Yeah, he is not me. So, but I have, my website is abrighterpurposecoach.com. You can find it there, or you can just Google Jane's Worry Elephant and you'll find they're listed all over the place. So.
All right, thank you. All right, so attendees, do you have any questions for our authors? Please unmute yourself or you can put the question in chat.
I saw 11 and then now there are 9. Yes. 9.
There's someone with their hand up.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Amanda.
Hi, thanks so much to all of you authors, by the way, too, for sharing your time with us today. I have a question around beta readers and sort of testing your work with younger readers. As a writer that's worked mostly with adults doing beta reads and giving feedback, I have very specific questions that I ask these people. so that I don't get, just like, oh yeah, I liked it, or no, I didn't like it back. I kind of wonder if you do use beta reading or test reading with young readers, then do you also have a list of questions that you ask them, or even some examples of questions that you might be willing to share, beyond just sort of taking a manuscript back from a young reader and saying, did you enjoy it?
May I just quickly respond to this? Hello?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Can you see me now? All
Yeah.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
Amanda, what I did was recently I had 4 6th graders, in a book club, and then they asked me questions, very specific questions about my book. So it was the other way around. I mean, I didn't say, did you like the book? And I said, what kind of questions do you have? And they had very specific questions targeting various sections of the book. Like, for example, how did you get information about a child who has undergone surgery, and is wearing a prosthetic leg? Where did you go to get this information? These were the questions that these 6th graders were asking me. How do you know so much about South Asia? So that, of course, that I could answer. So questions came from the kids themselves, from the children themselves. So, of course, I would love to get a list of questions that I can ask. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I just wanted to put this out, Amanda, for you.
Anyone else?
I agree with that. That's pretty much how, for middle grade, at least, how it works is, you can give the kids a list of questions, but they're going to tell you what they want to tell you.
Yes.
So being open and listening to whatever they say, and good readers, kids who like to read, they're going to come up with the most amazing questions for you that you're like, oh, that's what I was trying to say. Or wow, I didn't think about it that way. But they come up with really in-depth and interesting questions, and some of them the answers to right away, and it's like, oh good, that came across, and that's what they were supposed to be thinking at that point. And sometimes it's like, I guess I have to do more research on that, don't I? Did that answer the question?
Yeah, so far these answers are very, very interesting. Reverse, as Kelly mentioned, sort of soliciting questions from your readers versus pointed ones. So yeah, okay.
Thank you for that.
Any other questions? All right, I did have one that I've been asking. Like I mentioned before that I hope to become Stephen King. I want to write horror. That's kind of the genre that speaks to me. I have some ideas that are running around in my head, but I work full time and I have a very mentally demanding job. So how do you make time to write? And what advice can you provide people like me who have that desire?
I have an answer to this one. So, and it comes from being a reader. So when I first started a book club way back when I lived in Hawaii 20 years ago, it was one of my friends said, well, if you read for 5 minutes, you're a reader. So if you write for 5 minutes, you're a writer. And so a lot of times, especially with motivation, the way that it works for human beings is that once you start, the motivation sort of takes you from there. It's not, should I have the time to, but I'm making the time to. I get to write. I get this opportunity to spend those 5 minutes. And then that 5 minutes goes as far as you get to go, as far as your brain wants to spill out onto the page. So that would be my perspective.
And at what part does discipline take over? Because I think motivation takes you but so far. Or am I wrong in that?
I guess it depends on really what you want out of the process. If you have a deadline, that is quite a good discipliner, right? We have to reach that. So you can set your own deadlines and you can set mini deadlines within it. It just depends on how your process probably would work.
And deadlines also work with critique groups or writing partners, in that you have to have something to show and it has to be worthwhile. You have to respect the other person's time, as it has to have something worthwhile to show them. that's a motivator. Get your hands on the keyboard or on your pencil, and 5 minutes a day, you are a writer, as long as you do it fairly consistently.
Yep.
All right, thank you. Anyone else?
As long as I was teaching, but pre-retirement, I used to tell myself, okay, I'm going to allot a half hour, just a half an hour to sitting down and thinking about what I would like to write, just sort of close the door to the family, not look at any obligations I had, just sit down and do some breathing exercises. I do a lot of yoga. So, this breathing exercise always helped. And sit down, and even if I was not writing, just gather my thoughts and then put down whatever I thought was relevant, just write something. And as you folks pointed out, 5 minutes is all it takes just to gather your thoughts and put something down in writing. And with that, you have a sense of achievement also. And if you can create that space for yourself, then that space is what you're going to repeat every day. And it'll calm you down. It'll give you that peace of mind to write.
Thank you so much for that. All right, we did have one comment in chat from Amanda about writing for multiple audiences. This question was directed at Kelly because she's writing for kids and adults, kind of that message for adults as well. So she just acknowledges that writing for one audience seems difficult enough. Writing for multiple audiences seem like it might be tricky to navigate. And I saw that you put something in chat, Kelly, but can you just briefly talk to that?
So when I wrote the book, I wanted to write it for kids, but I knew like navigating anxiety is not a kid's job alone. You have to have partners in that. And so in my book, I actually included, like, because we have all the fun, storyline of it, but then I included a parent guide. So it's really just for the kids. Probably won't want to read that part. It's boring. It's just words, you know what I mean? But it gives parents the instructions on how to help their kids. So it's, explaining what anxiety is, explaining what self-talk is. It's explaining the negativity bias. It's explaining the amygdala hijack. It explains all these like kind of higher cognitive level concepts that a 2nd to 5th grader is not going to really get or care about. And so it was because I knew I needed to help parents help their kids, I had to include both because I didn't want the parents to have to go and do the research that I had to do to be able to help them. I wanted to give it to them. So that's why I included both.
Thank you for that. All right, any last questions from our attendees? Well, I want to thank everyone for attending our discussion. I am just so pumped now. I'm going to go write a story about my doll that came to life.
Oh, I'm so excited. Send it to us. We'll read it.
Well, actually, it's already written.
Oh, exciting. Even more exciting. Yay.
Thank you for doing this. And I'm sure the next time we meet, Renee, no more excuses, right?
No, I'm gonna be the next Stephen King. You're gonna say, I knew her when.
The quiz about names is gonna be next.
Are you gonna have a gate outside your house that has bats on it, like his?
Yes.
Is that
Perhaps.
We have a built-in critique group right here, Renee. We're going to expect some pages.
Yes. You have our emails.
That's right. I know how to reach you.
Thank
All
you
right,
so
so everyone,
much for doing this.
you're very welcome. This was such a delight. I'm so glad that we were able to have this wonderful discussion, but we're not done. This is part 3 in our author presentations. We're celebrating indie authors all week. Our next presentation is this evening at 6:30. I'm facilitating that discussion as well.
Wow.
We're talking about mysteries, thrillers, and horror.
Yes, that is where my bird is. That's why I'm going to listen very carefully because I just wrote one more.
So I'm going to put into chat the library event link. If you click on that link, if you had not registered, if you click on that link, the Zoom link to this evening's presentation is there. So you have it. You don't have to worry about getting an email from anyone. Thank you,
Thank you.
writers. Round of applause. This was
Thank you all
wonderful.
for such a delight meeting all of you. That is wonderful.
Wonderful, wonderful opportunity. Thank you all so much.
Perfect.
Thank you for being here. Have a
Enjoy.
wonderful rest of the day. Maybe I'll see you this evening.
Yes, you will.
All right.
Thank you.
Take
Thank you,
care.
everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.